Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to the Bearded Talk podcast. This is your host, Adam. There's never been another host, but it's me, so what up? And you're in your car, and you're just like, all right, next. Thank you. Next. But if you're still listening, super pumped to have you here. Today's episode is going to be really, really fun, but before we get to that, we have a little bit of housekeeping. One, we still have a few mentor sessions open, so if you're looking for somebody to just dive into your business and kind of walk you through a certain aspect that you're struggling with, maybe it's SEO, maybe it's social media, maybe it's just shooting or editing or workflow or backup, we still have a few of those. We only take 4 a month just to make sure that we have enough time to dive into those people and their businesses. But we still have a few mentor sessions left for February and March. So if you want to email me, just thebeardedtalk@gmail.com, or you can go to adammason.com/education. You can see all of our options there. We would love to have you. If you're trying to make your 2019 better than your 2018, that's the route to go right there. It's super affordable. It's less than the price of one shoot for most people and really, really fun. Secondly, if you want another option for fun education, is you got to go check out the Patreon. We got a lot of fun stuff over there, and it's just really, really cool. And it's a good community that we're building up over there. And it's just for you guys, only Bearded Talk listeners. So absolutely love that. But today, we've got James Anthony, Mr. James. I almost wanted to say the king has arrived. The king is here. He's just the man, and I like him a lot, obviously, as you could tell, and he gets me really pumped. And we're just going to talk to him about how to become a commercial photographer. How do you maximize the grind and opportunity in personal work? How do you put those three things together to really push forward and make it happen to where you can live in LA and live the dream if you want to be a commercial photographer? And so as a wedding photographer, I'm always fascinated by hearing other genres of photographers' lives and the journeys of how they got to where they're at. And so I wanted to have James on here just because he's a good guy, has amazing work, and he's all around creative. He's that person that he acts and he sings and he dances and he says that in the episode, he makes jewelry, but he's also a really, really, really good photographer. He also draws, so he's the man. And so we had to have him on here, and I absolutely love this episode. So without any further ado, here's my boy, James Anthony. James Anthony, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Adam. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to ask questions about me. All is well, man. All is well. I'm out here in LA, and it's always wake up feeling good, want to be productive. So this is a great way to start the new year and to start my day.
I love it, man. I love it. That the East Coast West Coast time difference is real for sure. Right. Have you always been out in LA? I know you've moved around a lot, and then some people out east by me in DC.
Yeah,
give me a little bit of background.
Well, my wife and I, we moved to Los Angeles May 1st. So literally, it was just 8 months, January 1st, that we've been here. Prior to moving to Los Angeles, we were in Atlanta. Prior to that, I was in New York. I'm originally from New York, and I went to high school, spent time in Maryland, DC area. That's where we have a lot of mutual colleagues and friends. Shout out to the Art Hype and Brian Summers. But yeah, this new transition from east to west I always say the main reason we did is because of the weather. So the transition from the experiencing of all 4 seasons to just 2, essentially spring and fall, I love it. I love waking up every day and the sun is shining. It kind of feels like Groundhog's Day because every day is a nice day. But I think we've been here, 8 months? It's rained 4 times. So I'm not complaining. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity and connections out here too. So that was the extreme driving force.
I love that. Now, did you moved around a lot as a kid? Was that just because of family or military or something like that?
Well, the funny thing is everyone always asks about military, but no, before high school, up until high school, I never spent more than 2 years at any school until I got to high school. And that was just moving to different neighborhoods. Each move was a progressive move on my nicer neighborhood, but with that move came zone changes. So I would always have to change schools. And then we finally found a neighborhood that we liked, and I was able to stay in the same high school for all 4 years. And then I later, gained a track and field scholarship to Savannah State University, and I migrated south to Georgia.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I had no idea, but that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah.
So how long have you been a photographer? Because I know now it seems like, one from the Shooting with Shooters, when I met you at that event, I was like, who's this James Anthony guy? Like, I know these other three. They're kind of the local peeps.
Right.
And then, I felt kind of out of place anyway at that event, but it was a good thing for me to feel out of place. And then, I'm like, who's this James guy? Like, he's really nice. He's got good work. He's shooting all these celebrities, all that stuff. And, it's definitely me being more of a wedding photographer. It's always fun to dive into like the commercial world.
Right.
And have you always just shot portraits, or did you do other stuff before photography? Like, what was that? How'd you get into photography, and, how'd you start?
Well, I've always, like, since childhood, I've always had a camera in my hand. I had, back when Kodak, like, my first camera was a Kodak, and if I can find a model, I would definitely keep it, just as a, memento. But started off with a Kodak when I was a kid. I remember taking photos at Disney World and things like that. But actually becoming a photographer, that didn't happen until college. And it was around the time, like, even high school, I always had a video camera in my hand. Going to track meets, I was always the documentarian, and with a sense of humor. So I actually just partnered with this company. This is a sidebar, but I just partnered with this company where they take your old VHS tapes, your high 8 tapes, and they digitize them. So I was able to send in all my footage from college and high school, and now I'm able to look at everything I used to shoot with, back in the over 50 ago. So it's one of those things like, man, this is pretty cool. But yeah, I started off seriously with photography. I started off shooting around campus when I was in college, shooting friends from school, anybody who would be interested in getting some photos. And then people would always tell me, like, James, there's you should definitely look into interning at a magazine. And someone sent me a link. They're like, Vibe magazine is looking for interns. And I said, what? So I reached out to Vibe. They responded. They were like, all right, well, yeah, come up for an interview. So I packed up my truck, my Toyota 4Runner, from Savannah, Georgia, and drove all the way to New York just for an interview, for an internship, which was unpaid in the photo department. And for me, that was one of those things where it's just like, hey, who knows what'll come from it, but at least it'll be on your resume. And that's around the time I'm in college, and they're putting emphasis on the importance of internships and networking. And I was already in a fraternity, so I already knew the importance of networking. So I drove up there for the internship at Vibe magazine, and that's where I fell in love with editorial photography. And upon graduating, I moved to Atlanta, but I still had that strong passion for photos, and I was still shooting. I was reaching out to magazines, up and coming magazines who needed, photographers to shoot the insert content, and some that needed photographers for the cover shoots. And slowly but surely, word of mouth, my name started getting started floating around to other clients, other people. People were willing to work with me, and so it's been about 12, 13 years now as an actual photographer.
I love that, dude. That's like one of the things that I noticed about your story is I imagine the skills have developed, and the people you photograph, both their skills and maybe their notoriety has kind of gone up.
Right.
Obviously you shoot a lot for celebrities, stuff like that. But it seems like there wasn't a huge, content, change. Like, you started, taking photos of people, at college, and then you continue, like, Vibe just kind of like poured gas on the fire,
right.
And was like, all right, here we go. And whereas a lot of photographers, you start out, and you might still have done this, but like, you shoot everything. You're like, oh yeah, I do newborns. Oh yeah, I do weddings. Oh, I do real estate. Okay. And you kind of find your niche. Hopefully, that is both your passion and what you can make money
right.
at. So it's cool that you kind of. It seems like for the most part, and you shoot a lot of stuff, but it's like you were able to find a groove early on, which might have led to your success, because it's like for other people, they've only been in whatever groove they're in a smaller time.
Yeah, I had a conversation with another photographer who we had a talk one time. It was actually a shout out to Loretta Houston. She looked at my portfolio one time and she was just, it was on my website actually. She looked at it. She said, well, what are you doing? Like, what type of photography are you marketing yourself as? Because here I see a topless model, then here I see a model in a church, then I see a maternity shoot here, then I see food here. So it was all over the place. And that's when she kind of instilled in me that you have to shoot the type of work that you want to attract. And for me, that was a pivotal moment, because after that conversation, literally everything changed as far as me marketing my website and my work in the light for the work that I wanted to attract. And that's exactly what started happening. I started being more focused and more intentional on the content that I was releasing. Then in turn, you know, people would see this work. And back then, Instagram wasn't really as big as it is now. So it was more so about Facebook. And I then had this resurgence of people from high school and college reaching out to me after I graduated because they saw that I was working and I had become a photographer, and they wanted to book someone that they knew. So that's when I started getting a lot of inquiries and bookings based out of the Maryland, D.C. area, because I had so many friends I had went to school with. Now they were adults, had families, or were starting businesses, and they needed some work, and they wanted to reach out to the person that they knew. So it was all it wasn't the smoothest transition, because within that time, it took time, but I was very focused always as far as what I do. So at that point, I guess that transitional period after college into, I guess, adulthood, where you're paying back Sallie Mae and everyone else, it was more so like, all right, so what can I do to keep this going? And for me, I just knew that I would be happy working for myself and being like truly a creative. So I struggled a little bit after college with getting a 9-to-5 because I had to pay back student loans and just adult, you know, the whole transition to fully adulting. And then you had the other side where it's just like, but this is not making me happy. I don't like going into somewhere, clocking in, and it's like, you need to do this better. Or I just didn't like that answering to someone. So yeah, it was a struggle until eventually I decided to clip that extra weight so I could fly. So yeah, we're here.
I love that. What was the kind of the first, you know, that first moment, you know, so you get the Vibe internship, you know, and then you're getting out of college, you're transitioning into adulthood, as you say, like, what was that? You know, everybody's got that moment, or, you know, for me, it was a certain wedding that I was like, oh, this one is going to, you know, change how I'm viewed, you know, locally. This is going to change how I feel. And it, you know, it like enforced what I wanted to do. For you, what was that first thing? You know, so it's not like what happened last year, but what was that first thing? Did you get like a big gig and you were able to clip those wings, clip that weight? Or what was the,
you know what it was? It wasn't just one thing. It was, I always say this, that it was the consistency of what I was doing, because it wasn't one thing that just changed it. I mean, it's still now, I can't put my finger on any one thing that changed everything. I can point out things that aided in, you know, the direction moving at a more rapid pace, but it was always a gradual thing. And for me, that gradual thing was after I decided to part ways with the 9-to-5 world, I told myself, well, if I'm going to try this entrepreneurship hat, then I'm going to have to grind for myself like no one else has done before, and like no one else will for you. So what I started doing was just going to every event, handing out my business card, and then reaching out to these up and coming magazines who didn't really have a reputation to attract, you know, the top of the line photographers just yet. So I found about 2 publications where we kind of grew together, and me starting to shoot people back then, like Genuine and Your Tweet. They're both singers, but these were people that when I shot them, they weren't in their prime. Their prime had been like maybe when we were in middle school and earlier years of high school. So they were no longer in their prime, but they were still very familiar faces. And that was my whole thing. Like on my website, I never wanted to call anyone a celebrity, because it was always, I felt, a very relative title, because not everyone is in tune with who this celebrity is versus who that celebrity is. So I just said, I'll just call this category on my page familiar faces, because even if you may not deem this person as a celebrity, you cannot deny that their face is not familiar. So I started reaching out to familiar faces, working with them. And it was kind of like that reputation thing, or like birds of a feather flock together. Once people started seeing me shoot these people, then they started, it's almost like a clout or credibility. You know, it's just, was working with James, then he has to be good. So I kind of knew how that game worked, and I took note, and I just really tried to hone in on that, because one of the first photo shoots I was able to assist on at Vibe was a cover shoot with Fat Joe and Jim Jones, and just being in that room and seeing how the photographer operated and set up his lights, and he just made it work within that confined space. And then when the cover comes out, the photos look amazing. I'm like, yeah, this is something that I have to do. And it was also a cool thing too, being in the photo assistant department. We would always see photographers from all over the United States send in their portfolios. And one thing it helped me do was kind of train my eye, because once you would open a photographer's book, you could automatically tell what coast they were on, whether it be East Coast or the West Coast. And even Atlanta had a certain feel as far as the aesthetic of their work. So it made me realize, like, all right, so I see this, I see that. I don't want to necessarily be pigeonholed in a type of like, oh, he's from this region. And when I started getting booked on more gigs, people started noticing. They're like, you're like a mix between this and that. And I was like, perfect. That's kind of what I wanted. I didn't want to just be looked at as, oh, you're an Atlanta photographer or you're a New York photographer. So to answer your question in short, it was a series of things that kind of led to the transition for, you know, me to be on this path right now. But to give you the one word answer, I would say consistency is what got me here.
Totally. Well, what was the first, you know, familiar face that you shot and you were like, okay, was it Genuine or somebody else?
You know, I think, I can't remember if it was Genuine, but Genuine and Tweet were kind of those two, like, oh, okay, I see you, James. I see you. I remember I was so excited when I got to see that Genuine photo, the photo spread in the magazine. But yeah, Lala Anthony, Eva Pickford, she was Eva Pickford back then, Eva Marcel now. But yeah, being able to shoot these people, Genuine, Tweet, Eva, Lala Anthony, those were those moments where it's just like, you know what, let's keep this going. And I think my fangs started growing longer and longer, like the hunger for the success. You know, back then it was a small success for me, but it was enough to keep me going and not want to stop. Because since I started photography, there have been many people after I graduated from my same school that became photographers. And I'd see their work and I'm like, oh, that's really dope. But then slowly but surely, you don't see them post any work anymore. And what I think it is people are not really aware of what it takes to become successful as a photographer. And a lot of people, so my whole thing was photography is a form of art. And I never wanted to be a starving artist. So what I told myself, I said, well, if I'm going to do this thing, this photography thing, which was my second love because acting and theater was my first, but the photography, I said, I have to pick the genre that I feel like could be the most lucrative. Of course, commercial is the most lucrative. And I feel like second to that would be your wedding and your entertainment. So for me, weddings, although I shoot weddings, actually I stopped this year, but I used to shoot weddings and I knew that could be lucrative, but it didn't draw me. And for me, I felt that a way for me to be happy, to work for myself, but also make good money would be to shoot entertainment. And that's what was a driving force. Because I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to be a starving artist, let's pick the least, let's pick the genre where I won't have to starve as much. So that's what led me down to the editorial direction.
I love that. Just like, please, I'm going to pick the place that has the most money, the most going on.
Exactly. You know? It's like, yeah, I'll be a photographer, but let's be smart about this. I don't want to have to, scratch. And then the cool thing about that is you get to, because what has happened is with that consistency, you build a reputation for being reliable and dependable and professional.
Yeah.
And then you get your repeat clients. So after a while, these celebrities then become friends, and you're getting invited places, and you meet other friends of theirs. And it just makes your world grow in ways where it's one of those reminders, like, what got me here in this moment is me believing in myself and me taking myself seriously. So those are always reminders for me. Like, even in a moment when I'm walking somewhere, like I never let those moments slip by. Like my wife will tell you, I'll always take a moment to kind of sit back and be like, wow, I'm so grateful for this moment right here. And I feel like those things keep me grounded, because I mean, that is who I am, but I feel like it makes you that much more appreciative for the next opportunity. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of the photographers, at least on the East Coast, and folks in, Shooting with Shooters, that kind of that crew, and a lot of the photographers in DC that I've met, and I went to school with a lot of photographers. It's like, I don't know why it worked for me necessarily at the time. We can look back and say why it worked, and I don't know why it worked for you, at the time, but there's something to be said just for consistency. Like, I don't even think I'm the best wedding photographer in the world. I don't think I, am creating stuff that makes everybody ooh and ah, but I do think that, like, my experience and consistency. This year we shot our 150th wedding.
Nice.
We've been to a lot. We've seen, a lot of crazy stuff. We've seen a lot of beautiful stuff, and I think, like you said, having, everybody's going to get that connection, hopefully, especially in DC, LA, Atlanta, New York, these big cities. I think there are often times, and you can have that opportunity even if you don't have, the skills, but it's, can you get the second, like, what will you do with that first opportunity determines if you'll get another one.
Exactly.
And that consistency, it's just something that it's not something they teach you in photo school, right? It's not like, hey, here's the aperture, here's your lighting. It's like, no, if you want to make this a business, it's the same thing. Like, I guess if we were plumbers, like, we'd have to work on toilets a lot, and it'd be weird. But like, you need that grind to keep going, and that's the biggest thing I tell people when they're like, how do I make it happen? How can I leave my full-time job? And I'm like, do you shoot? Some people don't even shoot like once a week. And I'm like, well, that's what's happening. Like, you're not even practicing for fun. You're not going outside.
Exactly.
You're not like just trying,
Exactly.
But,
and I think that's another thing too. I've had a conversation with someone in the past, and they're like, I'm just waiting for an opportunity to fall in my lap. I'm waiting for an opportunity to fall in my lap? Like, what? What is that? Yeah, I literally stopped him. I said, for one, if you're waiting for anything, you're going to be waiting until you die. Because the conversation was real casual. He's like, I'm really proud of you, man. I'm just waiting for something to pop. I'm like, I didn't wait for anything. I had to, and I say this often, but my fangs are always out. I feel like a vampire, especially in the creative world, because my number one pastime is networking. I won't get in an Uber pool without opening my mouth, without speaking to someone. I'll be in a Starbucks, and I'll never leave a Starbucks if I'm there for, hours on end without speaking to at least one other person, which in turn may lead to a really dope connection. So it's one of those things like, I don't wait for anything. They always say closed mouths don't get fed. And I'm a firm believer in that. It's like, you got to ask for what you want, or at least find out what needs to be done to get to where you want. And I feel like that part of me, as far as that fearless side, has been a major contributor to the success that I've been able to live through. So I always say, never be afraid to ask a question. The worst thing they can know. Never be afraid to ask how something is done, or look it up on your own in order for you to know something. So yeah, you have to be your largest supporter, your largest cheerleader, and you also have to be present. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in being present.
Totally. I love that you also mentioned, like, people you photo assisted for a while when you were an intern, and like, the few times I've been on set for films, it was so impactful, just like how I run my business now. And then, photography wise, like, it's never going to hurt you to be on set with another creative, photographer or video team, and just like be around with those guys or those gals and just kind of learning, you know, what's the process, what do they do, and you know, like you said, that one shoot with Fat Joe, it's one, you saw this thing and you're like, okay, that obviously is Fat Joe, and at a lot of commercial shoots you see what's happening, but then the photos you're like, oh, there was something was happening, some kind of like magic, you know, and it's like a really good storyteller telling a story versus like reading an article. And it's, you know, I always say the photographers are kind of like ambassadors or interpreters to the world. And so it's one of those things that people, it's another one of those things I'm just trying to give some soft advice to folks who are listening, because I know you and I, we love consistency. You know, go and assist if you can for free. Like, find the photographers, and you know, I preach this all the time. And it's just like, go be on set. And yeah, it might not be glamorous, and they might say no the first time, but if you ask consistently, you know, eventually we might say, hey, we actually have a spot. We need you to carry our bags, you know, or hey, we need you to do this. And
hey,
you know,
consistency is everything. And anyone who listens to this podcast, just be on the lookout for this year, because I don't know what will transpire, but what has happened in the past years, within the past, I've DM'd the editor-in-chief of Vibe magazine several times within this last year. Now, we don't personally know one another, because I don't even think he was at Vibe when I was interning in 2006, but it was one of those things like I've seen work that I've done within 2018 that he has commented on, like whether it be the Shade Room or another celebrity. And he's like, yo, this is really dope. I was following him, so I was able to see his comment on another page subsequently, which led me to DM him like, hey, I used to intern back at Vibe. This would be a full circle moment if I could shoot any upcoming cover. He was like, yeah, actually, I got something in mind. Of course, you know, if you don't have experience in the industry, there can be a lot of broken promises, but even if not broken promises, just the industry can be very busy. People become very busy. Things can easily slip past their memory or whatnot. So one thing I would always hit him up every few months. I'm like, hey, just a reminder, closed mouths don't get fed. I just want you to keep me on your radar for a cover. Okay. You know, we back and forth commented and DM'd. And then this last year, I mean, like a few days before the end of the year, I sent him a DM. I said, hey, 2019, you let me know what I have to do to shoot a cover. He said, this year for sure, I promise you. So again, even if it's not consistency with work, it's consistency with communication. So that way, because you got to think, when you have a position like that, you get hit up all the time by creatives. So I just didn't want to get lost in the sauce or in the stack of papers that he may get of people that want to work with. So my thing was like, hey, be consistent in communicating. So yeah, consistency is something we take very seriously, because it sets you apart from the rest.
Totally. So what about, you know, so you mentioned some of these magazines and some of these editorials, like you reaching out. Is that, one, kind of explain how that works for folks trying to get into kind of commercial photography? And then two, what does that look like for you now? You know, now you have like a management, and like, how does that work when you're kind of at that level too, you know, and like, what's the difference between those two?
And the funny thing is, I actually said this year I was going to change. I was going to kind of step back into the boots that I wore previous years before I got real comfortable with management. And that was just reaching out to people. Hey, do you want to shoot? You know, this can be a collaborative thing, because those passion projects and I call passion projects meaning where there's no real budget involved. It's just kind of people, creatives collaborating on something because it's a passion project and it's something they want to do, and everyone can benefit from their portfolio. So I told myself I was going to do more passion projects this year. And I say that because last year was a really good year for me, and 2018 was a really good year. 2017 was my first year with my new management. 2018, I was with them the whole year. So it was one of those, all the work that I had put in prior kind of made the last year and a half, the last 2 years really comfortable, in a sense where my management was handling all my inquiries and my bookings. And with the success of James Shoots and Draws, it was a consistent fan base that were reaching out and booking me. So it didn't leave me with my back against the wall where I had to feel like I need to shoot something. I need to So last year was a little more comfortable for me, but then looking back at the body of work, it's not what I'm used to because I'm used to creating more passion projects. And that's something I said I wanted to get back into this year. I want to shoot more projects that I feel strongly about, that other people would want to collaborate with, and not just sit back and kind of chill and live off the bookings, which is cool. But you never want to stop. Like you said, you never want to stop honing in on the craft, or, you know, going out on a whim and just say, you know what, I'm going to shoot around today. So me going out and quote unquote shooting around today would be producing a full on photo shoot in the desert with an actress. And then we release the photos 3 weeks later, and then everyone loves those, hopefully. And then you get more bookings. So it's like, you kind of got to know what the formula is and never forget what got you to where you are, you know? So it's like, you can get comfortable, but don't stop doing the things that got you to the place that you're in. So for me, 2019 is diving more back into the passion projects. And with that, you know, I can create more content that, like I said earlier, is like create more content in the direction for the work that you want to attract. So for me this year is doing partnerships with larger brands. That's what I want to focus more on this year, because the more people I'm around, the more conversations that I hear that I otherwise would not have even been privy to. So when I say that is when your friends start becoming millionaires, or when you're in a company of other millionaires and you start to hear their conversation, your thought process starts to change. Your ideas start to change. It's like, maybe I could do this. Maybe I can invest in this. So it's been a lot of that happening within the last 2 years, where it's now like, okay, so I have friends doing this and doing that. What partnerships could I do to set me up for the next best thing? So this first quarter, I have a lot of things that I'm working on, and which in turn will make the last quarter remarkable. I already know, because the last 2 Decembers have been amazing for me. So I want to keep that tradition and that, you know, just that consistency of making the top of the year grind. And by the end of the year, you're looking back like, wow, all this happened.
That's awesome. For kind of talking about that one personal shoot, let's say, for example, because I know a lot of people listening to this, they're going to want to know. So let's say you do that shoot, you know, with the actress in the desert. You know, let's say, you know, you're just doing it for personal. Let's say you spend a little bit of money, you know, not that the actress isn't famous, but we'll say, you know, maybe you put out $1,000. You say, hey, we're hiring a PA. We're going to pay our model well. And we got to, you know, maybe we got to get a permit or something silly for, you know, for the location. You shoot all that. And one, it's mostly for you. You're trying to exercise a creative vision, trying to do this thing. What can, you know, you mentioned it. One, we want to show everybody, right? We want to be like, hey, check out this new work. It's dope. It's awesome. You know, I think of like Brian Summers, like color stuff, you know, that was awesome. What can you do with that work once you've done it, even just personally? Like, can you send that to some people and just be like, hey, check this out, it's pretty dope, you know? And like, what strategies, what do you do with that kind of work?
So one thing, like, I'll go back to, I believe 2015, it might have been 2015 or 2016. I did a photo shoot in Brooklyn, New York, and it was on the Brooklyn Bridge. And I had asked my friend, who is Angela Simmons, who's one of the daughters of Rev Run from Run DMC. She's a New York native as well. And I asked her, I said, you know what? I was thinking about doing a photo shoot with a model, but I could double this exposure if I use a familiar face. So I said, Angela, would you mind being in this photo shoot? She did that shoot. I funded everything. You know, I tapped everyone on the shoulder, hair, makeup, wardens, and even a video. Brian Summers was a videographer for the behind the scenes footage of that shoot. And everyone, that was a passion project. Everyone was doing it for the love. So what ended up happening after that is I was able to, because of who she was, I was able to shop the shoot around to Uptown Magazine. Uptown Magazine then acquired the photos. After they ran those photos in the insert of their magazine, the photos were talked about on blog TV shows, like for the next few months, where it's like, have you seen Angela Simmons do this? Have you seen Angela Simmons on the Brooklyn Bridge? Who's the photographer who shot it? Angela and I, you know, we were already friends, but our relationship got even stronger just because, you know, it's like when you work with someone and the work is good, it's like you kind of, it's like endorphins. It's like adrenaline. Like, oh man, that was great. We got to do something again. So our relationship got even better. But it was that insert that then led that magazine to ask me a few months later. They said, hey, we would like to fly you out to Great Exuma, Bahamas for 4 days so you can shoot a 10-page spread at the Sandals Resort and a cover for our Uptown wedding and travel issue. So and it's one of those things where it's like, hey, closed mouths don't get fed and scared money don't make money. And the other phrase, it takes money to make money. So yes, I went in the pocket and I spent money to produce that shoot, but then they threw a little bit of extra change back to me to pay for the rights for the photos to run them in the magazine. But then after feedback, they then hit me up about 3 or 4 months later, flying me out to, an island to shoot their 10-page spread. And that would have never happened had I not done that passion project. So that's a prime example of, like, when I do this shoot at the magazine, in the desert, my process then is to hold on. And that's another thing. Some people may not have the patience. I have a lot of patience. So some people want to post things and see the gratification instantaneously. And I'm like, hey, I've literally shot projects and not seen them released like until 8 months later, or not. Sometimes over a year. With one of the actors I just worked with from Cloak and Dagger. I shot his images over a year. I'm like, we kind of got to let these get out before you start looking different because you're growing up. So sometimes you have to have patience. You may, these projects may be your babies and you want to see them come to life like right then, the next month, the next week. But you always have to realize that in its own time, everything will happen the way it's supposed to. So yeah, that's that previous example with Angela Simmons on the Brooklyn Bridge. That's kind of how I've always been operating with my shoots. Shoot dope content, make it so dope that by the time you present it to someone, they can't say no because it's so dope. So that's one thing that I like to practice, just the consistency.
No, that's awesome. You heard it here first, people. Shoot dope stuff. Okay. So, just kind of helping out, kind of practical, as we get towards the end of here is like, the magazine is going to pay you the rights for their photos. What's the best way that a photographer can be prepared for that moment? Like, do you have like a regular standard contract and then they say, hey, here's our fee. And I know that there are kind of normal things. They'll say, hey, this is just for print and this is for print and social media. This is for print and online. This is, what's the best advice you can give on kind of, what to be prepared for? We can't promise that photographers are going to get paid, a ton the first time, but at least they can kind of know what's going on.
I honestly say, like, when I did the whole Angela shoot, I didn't have management back then. And to be honest, it was always a struggle for me being to be a creative all around, like not even to sound any type of way, but I've performed at the Kennedy Center, like I've been on TV, I've been in movies, acting, script, dancing, baking, all that, drawing, painting, all of that stuff. I've made jewelry and made money. I've made clothes and I've made money. It's being a consummate, like, creative. It is one of those things it can be a struggle to juggle creativity and business. And I know that a lot of entrepreneurs who are creative struggle with being just as efficient on the business side as they are as the producing of creative projects. So for me, it has been a struggle trying to plant my footing and feel strong enough to know what contract is for what or what I should be asking for. So when I did that shoot with Angela and, the whole business transaction had to take place between me and the publication, whatever they offered, I was like, that's cool. I didn't know the jargon. I didn't know what to ask for, right usage, how long, blah, blah, blah. But I just knew that I was hungry enough and I was passionate enough about what I was doing to not really care about the money because I would have done it anyway. I was happy just to get anything for that project because had the magazine not picked it up, I would have ran it on social media regardless. But it just felt good knowing that someone felt that your work was worthy of something. So the lessons that I've learned is once I got better on the business side, that's when business really that's when James Anthony photography really started taking off. Like I did research because everything I learned was either from YouTube University or Google University. So it's like, oh, how do you type up a contract? Google it. How do you do this? Google it. I'm a firm believer in there should never be anything that you say you do not know how to do in this day and age, because every answer is in all of our back pockets or our purses or our hand, and that's our phone and that's the internet. So leading up to this, yeah, you can ask advice or opinions, but there should never be like, I don't know what to do. How can you not know what to do when there are millions of blogs and, posts of, if you want to start a contract, here's this template or here's this example. So I never allowed myself to say, I don't know what to do. It's all you're really saying is, I don't have the patience to do the research to find out how to better myself. And when you say it like that, it makes you hold yourself accountable. So it's like, if I have the same resources that this other guy has and he's doing better than me, I can't look to him for the answers. It's just like, you know what? Because he might have had that guidance from someone, but the fact that is, all the information that he knows is at all of our fingertips, so yep. That is one thing for me, so when management came into play, I was a little reluctant because I had being in control for so long, and my business up until that point was my baby, like I was very, just mindful and protective of it. And I just wanted to make sure everything was being done the right way. But with a good relationship with my management, like I'm truly happy with how everything works. I don't have to be the bad guy anymore. I can solely focus on just the creative process. And that's something that I really enjoy because it just allows me to focus on nothing but creating.
Right. You're going to get paid.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that. I love the story about the Angela Simmons shoot, and just, the few times I used to shoot a lot of bands back in the day, and, I was in a band, and so similar to you, just once you're kind of in one of the circles, even if it's a low level circle, even if it's like a B level something or a C level, D level, whatever, you do make some friends, and, got to shoot some really big bands, some fun bands. And for me, what happened was, I put the stuff out on social and on the website, just kind of like, hey, this is, this cool shoot I got to do. And, I was just shooting the live show. I didn't even take any portraits. And luckily through Google SEO, their publicists reached out and they're like, hey, they asked me like critically, like, how'd you get into the show or whatever? And, I was being super honest. I said, hey, the tour manager, blah, blah, blah. Like I had a press pass. I was there like totally officially. And they said, hey, we'd like to offer you, X amount of thousands of dollars for these photos. And I was in college and I was like, what? Like what in the world? And I shot these for free. I shot these, I used to shoot a ton of bands because I was like, oh, we get a free ticket to the show. This will be great. And you get front row, at least for the first 3 songs. And they offered that money. And I was like, there's no way this is real. So I was like, sure, but, let me know how we can make this happen. And, you never know. It's the main theme what we've talking about is like commercial level photography, it can be so lucrative, and there are some big dogs out there, but it's one of those things too where it's like, guys, like just shoot every day if you can, like you can just shoot one more time than whoever else is shooting. Like that's all you got to do. A lot of photographers are waiting, like you talked about, like some people are waiting until they get paid to practice. And you're like, no, your client's not paying you for that. Your client's paying you for what you've already been able to do. And I love that you still do personal work. I love that. We had another photographer on. His name is Jeremy Coward, and he he still does personal work and does it for fun. And like he's still experimental. He's still weird and like tries new things. And it's just so fascinating. And it's like, do we really love the craft, or do we love that instant gratification on Instagram? Do we love that that gratification of being in the magazine? And it's like, hey, you still love that shoot with Angela Simmons, whether you got paid $10 or $10,000.
Still love it. And the funny thing is, some of my projects with her have been my best, like to my personal, like most favorite projects. And that is one of the things that I'm so grateful for, because some of my best work are with people that I get to work with on a regular basis, or at least consistency. So I feel like I'm just so grateful for the people that come to me. I even have have a shoot tomorrow with a singer from the UK, but lives in the States now, with Estelle. And this is our second time working with each other. And it's always one of those things like, after the first time, I was like, did she like me enough to want to work with me again? And then a few months later, I'm like, yes, when she hits up the management. So it's one of those things I'm like always grateful, always just, and I truly do love what I do. So like you said, is when it is a passion, you still going to want to do it even if you're not getting paid, So that is one thing that I always like to make sure that I keep doing, is practicing getting better, and something just to piggyback on what you said earlier is like, I'll still assist someone to this day, because there has never been a time where I assisted anyone, whether they've been shooting 10 years longer than me or for just 2 months. There has never been a time where I assisted anyone and didn't learn something new. So I'm not opposed to assisting ever. It just depends on if it's worth it, depending on what the project is. But yeah, like, no one ever knows everything, and you're always learning, and that's how you continuously grow. So yeah, it's practicing. I think what makes people truly great are the people that don't forget to love what they're doing and don't forget to continuously learn how to do it better.
I love that, man. Dude, thank you so much for being on, James. Where is the best place where people can go DM you? You have a ton of good stuff on Instagram. Like, we didn't even get into talking about your illustration and all that stuff. Like, where's the best place for people to find you? And what are you looking forward to in 2019, man?
Yeah, 2019, I'm looking forward to some amazing partnerships with brands. 2019, I'm also looking to do at least 3 international fashion shoots, which are passion projects as well, because it's one of those things, like, once I started picking up travel photography, then I started getting booked to fly out the country just to shoot people. So it's like, you have to create the work you want to attract. So this year, I definitely want to create at least 3 to 4 international fashion shoots, do larger partnerships with larger brands, and really just travel more. I do want to travel more. I have a friend who's trying to become the first Black woman to travel to every country this year, and she's just inspiring. So it's another reminder to keep people around you in your immediate circle that uplift you and motivate you and somewhat intimidate you to want to be a better person. Where you can reach me at www.jamesanthonyphotos.com. And I know in this day of social media, people prefer an Instagram page more than a website. So the social media on all platforms, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere, is I am James Anthony. That's I am, like an introduction, James Anthony.
I love it, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Have a great one, man.
Always a good time talking with my boy James Anthony. He's one of those guys I met last year, and I just love his heart. He shoots everybody that you would ever want to shoot if you're a commercial photographer, and he's still just so humble. Like, he'll answer your DMs, he'll talk to you, he'll say what's up. Like, and I know that sounds silly in this day and age, but it's hard to, that's still work for somebody to check their DMs or to answer emails, to answer calls, etc. And he's just so approachable, and he's that guy. And we have so many guests on here that are like that, where he grinded and he took his time. And if you are listening to this and you say, I would never drive from Georgia to New York for an internship with a magazine I like, you've already lost. Like, I'm not even trying to be mean, but you've lost. Like, that's the deal. And you have to pursue those things with the tenacity. Like, would you rather have your 9 to 5 or do what you love? And it's simple as that. You can either chase the dragon or you can just be boring. And James is one of those guys that, like, he gets me fired up. He gets me really pumped. So thank you so much. Definitely go follow him. I am James Anthony on Instagram. You can find his links in the show notes. Such a good guy. And we will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for being awesome.